Good afternoon. Thank you for those kind words, Peter. I consider this a privilege to be able to share my thoughts on this subject with you this afternoon, affordable energy for humanity, if not now, when. I would like to frame the contours of this talk around two key challenges that I believe will be with us for the rest of this century. The threat of climate change and transition to a cleaner, low carbon energy system that does not leave a large proportion of humanity in the dark. Now, that there is an urgent need for a global transition to a low carbon energy system or energy future is clearly evident. Climate science provides the foundational basis for that judgment. The recognition of the threat of climate change has also moved just about all the key global actors to action. Witness the Paris 2015 Accord, now being ratified by governments around the world. I go on to argue, though, that energy remains and will continue to remain a fundamental enabler of human betterment. So if so, then the question becomes, how can we deliver affordable energy to every global citizen that is also clean, and more importantly, can we devise practical solutions for a low carbon energy system on a time scale that is meaningful? This composite NASA satellite image of the world at night, showing areas of light and darkness, is a stark reminder of the disparity of energy access on a global scale. Hans Gosling, the eminent Swedish demographer, has summarized the problem well, and he puts it this way: 1.5 billion people in the world have both a light bulb and a washing machine. The next 4 billion have just a light bulb. And the bottom 1.5 billion have neither. Rooted in this disparity is the source of so many confrontations and acrimonious debates around geopolitics of energy, energy security, consequences of energy use on climate, the choice of relevant technologies, the tussles between markets and state intervention, and who pays for improving access to energy. This picture summarizes the problem well. With 1.3 billion without electricity and 2.5 billion with no access to clean cooking fuels, and with over 95% of that with people living with no access, living in sub-Saharan Africa. You might say, so what? Well, the health consequences of this inequality are as clear and disturbing as they are staggering. The total annual mortality, the number of deaths each year directly related to household indoor air pollution, equals 4 million plus. This unacknowledged silent killer on a global scale exceeds the number of deaths from malaria, AIDS, and TB combined. That this tragic tale continues to maintain its grip, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and developing Asia, is a matter of record, well documented, well rehearsed, but below the level of our collective consciousness for action. What does the prognosis for the future look like? The trends over the next 2 decades, as estimated by the International Energy Agency, reveal a disturbing picture. If we choose to look the other way and do nothing, by 2030, more people in Africa will be without electricity than today. Lack of electricity access perpetuates a vicious cycle of energy poverty. Time is consumed by drudgery. Lack of energy prevents income generation opportunities. Low productivity equals low earnings. Low earnings equals no surplus cash. No cash equals inability to pay for life's essentials. Thus, the energy poor remain trapped in poverty. Here's a powerful image, I think, that speaks volumes. An enduring feature of this image is not just the effective use of lights under street lamps for homework, although it is central, but in my view, it reveals something much more fundamental. There is an innate desire to want to know, a desire to learn, to reduce the boundaries of ignorance, and in doing so, push the envelope of darkness out of the way. And I love this quote from Thomas Jefferson, as he puts it, within quotation mark, "He who receives ideas from me receives instruction himself without lessening mine, as he who lights his taper at mine receives light without darkening me." This is the true tragedy of energy poverty. The burden of fuel wood gathering and water collection falls disproportionately on women and young girls, consuming in excess of 6 to 8 hours per day to support a family's cooking and heating related needs. Time, the most important asset available to each one of us. And here it is, taken up, practically stolen, in the struggle to meet basic needs. Lack of access to quality energy effectively shuts down the prospects and the potential for economic opportunity, education, and social development. To be able to make the most of the time available to us in a normal lifespan, it is rarely acknowledged that availability of abundant and affordable energy is the necessary ingredient for a better quality of life. On the path to freedom from want, energy access is the critical determinant of social and economic change. It would be most helpful if our public discourse on energy issues could be reframed to recognize energy use as a liberating force, an effective medium of exchange for limited human time. Let me make one point. Human labor is a poor substitute for power generation. For example, the maximum power this gentleman on a bicycle can generate is no more than 100 watts. And if he rides the bicycle continuously, say for 15 hours at a strenuous pace, he will be able to generate about a kilowatt hour of electricity. And that's about 10 cents worth of electricity. So the opportunity cost of time is obvious. Even at a wage rate of $2 per day, that would not be a bargain. And at a minimum wage of $10 per hour, I don't think I could convince anyone in this audience to get on a bike to generate power. Of course, a modern tractor does a little better. it generates anywhere from 15 to 450 kilowatts of power delivery to help produce an agricultural surplus. The key point I want to make is this. When energy as raw fuel meets the second law of thermodynamics and Maxwell's equations, magic begins to happen. Bundles of wood, bags of coal, buckets of oil require transformation through a conversion technology before they become useful. The second law, in essence, prescribes how much useful or high-quality thermal energy you can extract. We will, of course, remain indebted to Mr. James Clerk Maxwell for the basic insights that highlight the relationship between electricity, magnetism, along with the wave nature of light and electromagnetic radiation. It has been a long journey, over 2 centuries of scientific and technological developments and innovations across a range of disciplines to get us to powerful, smart devices that change lives for the better. This Maasai herdsman, with a smartphone in his hands, now has access to the world's entire knowledge base. Price of meat on the Nairobi market, perhaps, weather forecast, or ability to communicate essential information to family, friends, or he could probably tell you the best sushi restaurant in Toronto. Ordered energy is magic. It has much higher value. Convergence of the information and communication technologies, ICT I will call it from now on, with the energy system holds enormous promise for transformative change, and I'll speak to that point as we go along in the lecture. This image illustrates very clearly the social tensions in the debates about centralized versus decentralized power systems, the disparity of access, and why we cannot ignore provision of services to the most needy. If you think about it, through an interconnected system of pipes and pipelines and power plants and processing plants, the global energy system extracts a massive amount of primary energy annually, upwards of 550 exajoules, or translated into 50 terawatt years of energy, and yet leaves millions to scour the forests for twigs and branches for basic needs. This is a major failing of the global energy system that produces a vast amount of energy, yet delivers so little to so many. The economic calculus that fails to deliver electricity to the distant and dispersed communities is one thing. The inability to extend services within easy reach of the existing infrastructure speaks volumes about the business models that remain indifferent to the needs of many. So, if the energy poor are to be drawn into the mainstream of economic activity and opportunity, energy access must take on a higher priority. Here I show the link between energy access and life quality, and I've chosen a metric that's easy to remember and it provides a useful anchor. Annual GDP per capita on the left-hand side of this picture, and annual kilowatt hours access to energy, electricity per person on the right-hand side. At the bottom of this ladder is what lack of energy access delivers. A quality of life that is an offense to our scientific and technical capacity to deliver. An annual energy consumption levels below 100 kilowatt hours per person and at the relevant income levels in the order of $100 per capita, life is rather short, brutish, and nasty. All of sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Latin America, large areas of Asia are at or near this level. And here is the cruelest irony of all. Think of Nigeria as an energy-rich, oil-rich country. Per capita energy access levels, electricity levels is in the order of 150 kilowatt hours per person. And that's about the average of all of Africa. That translates to a level of energy access that's somewhere between 5 to 15 watt light bulb. Moving up towards basic quality of life requires energy access somewhere in the 750 to 1,000 kilowatt hours per person at income levels perhaps in the $2 to $3 range per person per day. This is when we begin to see substantial improvements to various indicators of life quality, life expectancy being one of them. The next tier, what we might call improved quality of life, straddles somewhere between 3,000 kilowatt hours excess per person, that's the world average, to 6,000 kilowatt hours, which is the average in the EU. At very high levels of excess, over the 10,000 kilowatt hour mark, and that's Canada, US, Iceland, a number of the Nordic countries, we see a flattening of the curve, suggesting room for some other goals and objectives where strong efforts to conserve energy and improve efficiency makes a great deal of sense. If you ask, what would it cost to make universal energy access a reality? There are kind of two ways to approach this question. Centralized stations, big grid, an extension of the distribution network. Investment costs can be readily calculated to deliver a minimum of 1,000 kilowatt hours per person. For 2 billion people, you're looking at $2 trillion over a 20-year time frame. Such a number tends to have a paralyzing effect. The existing electricity infrastructure delivers highly reliable service from centralized large-scale power plants connected to the power grid at a relatively low unit energy cost. However, the economies of scale for serving large populations are not the same as those for meeting the needs of energy poor who live in remote and dispersed communities distant from the grid. The costs of extending the power grid to the rural poor have proven to be so prohibitive that the default policy option is take no action. To address energy access, a tiered approach to access, established now by the United Nations, is helpful. It is a recognition of the fact that solutions do not have to be structured as a have versus have not world, but rather various levels of demand, supply, and quality of energy supplied have to be targeted for different needs and contexts. Development of distributed energy resources and technologies can provide the necessary steps for a march up the energy ladder to different tier levels. More on that later. This graphic shows how the cost of energy and the value it delivers in different quantities depends upon context. The energy poor, that's the green part of the box here, versus those in wealthier parts of the country, energy intensive areas, that's the blue box. The level of energy services at different price points has a different value to the end consumer depending on their situation. Small amounts of energy have high value, high positive impacts on human development potential, albeit at a relatively high nominal cost. So this points to an important observation, that the amount of electricity needed to address many of the problems stemming from energy poverty is not so great. For people living with no access to electricity, the first few hundred watts of power can provide life-changing tasks, turning on lights for reading, working at night, charging mobile phones, or running small refrigerators. To help unleash the economic productivity of those with very low incomes, provision of even basic level of energy service can be the tipping point for a range of positive economic and social outputs. The use of local energy resources such as sun, wind, bioenergy, or access to run-of-river hydroelectricity. Simple point I want to make on this slide is that small amounts, even at high cost, can yield high value. The energy access challenge, of course, cannot be decoupled from the big picture trends of growth, both in energy demand and issues related to climate change. Over the next 4 decades or so, global energy demand either doubles or triples. There are 3 key factors that drive this. Of course, population growth, the existing structure of economic production, and a slow but steady transition away from extreme poverty. If there is no change in the global development profile, another 2 to 3 billion people will be living with us by 2050 in poverty. That's the bar chart shown as the base case. The next profile reflects the United Nations goals to eliminate at least extreme poverty, shown here as a low poverty scenario of the world. In that case, energy demand doubles. And the one that depicts, let's call it a relatively prosperous world, energy demand triples. So this combination of population growth, changing income levels, set a formidable energy challenge, either a doubling or tripling in terms of increased energy demand over the next 4 decades. These are the UN goals for sustainable development for the 21st century. UN Goal 7, affordable clean energy, is in my view the epitomizing sustainable development challenge, given its strong influence on the other goals: health, education, food, clean water, reduction of the global carbon footprint. The sustainable development challenge and access to clean energy is also relevant in the Canadian context. This is as much a problem for us to address here in Canada as it is a global problem. There are some 279 off-grid communities with a total population of 220,000 people. These communities are widely distributed across the country and lack access to piped natural gas. They range in size from often a few dwellings as 10 dwellings to over 20,000 residents in Whitehorse. Of these 279 communities, the majority, 200 of them, rely on diesel or fuel as the main source of their electricity generation. Electricity prices in remote communities are higher than the rest of the country, mainly due to transportation access and fuel costs. For example, the unsubsidized residential electricity rate in Cougar, Nunavut, is about $1.15 cents per kilowatt hour, about 9 times higher than the Canadian average of around 12 cents a kilowatt hour. Relative to Canada as a whole, a disproportionately large number of these communities have majority Indigenous populations, First Nations, Inuit, or Métis. A combination of limited access to fuel, high generation costs, and cold climate plus aging diesel generators all conspire to deliver poor environmental performance and inability to access affordable energy. From about 25 to 50% of the communities in Nunavut, Ontario, and British Columbia are subject to what they call restricted access, which means new housing, buildings, or water treatment plant upgrades cannot be connected to the electrical system, thus halting community economic development and improvements to the community's way of life. And this is a picture from Atawapiskat, and I think that's a story you know well as to how it's played itself out in our media. Let me turn to solutions, because this is the most interesting part of the talk. But before I do that, I would like to observe several perspectives converge. And whether it's the International Energy Agency, or the IPCC, or the World Energy Council, or the Global Energy Assessment done a couple of years ago, and I'll quote from the Global Energy Assessment, that massive diffusion of new technologies for meeting thermal energy, motive power, and electricity needs is required to meet the grand challenge of improving energy access. This requires innovation on both technological and institutional levels. Providing universal energy access to electricity is not just a moral imperative. It delivers substantial social, health, and environmental benefits. End of quote. Before moving to the solutions, let me also offer you a working definition of affordable energy. I don't want you to go away coming to a lecture on affordable energy and say, well, you never defined it. I propose that the cost of basic energy service must be less than 10% of disposable income, either at the individual or household level. So for a person living on $2 a day, the energy cost must not exceed 20 cents a day. And that's an aspirational target. This highly challenging target not only has clarity of purpose, it is a metric against which progress can be measured. And realization of this vision rests on critical advances in the scientific and technological capacity to deliver innovations on a scale large enough to render energy poverty a phenomenon of the past. I'd like to share a story with you. And this is as told by Dr. Laura Stackel. She's a medical practitioner out of Berkeley, California, and had gone to West Africa to study essentially medical practice in a rural environment. And this is as she tells it. Imagine you are one of 15 million pregnant women who suffer a complication during childbirth. You're poor, you've been trying for 2 days to have your baby at home, and something is not right. Your family struggles to get you to a medical facility. You arrive at the hospital after an arduous journey, and at the maternity ward, what do we have? This is the only light that's available. Of course, the midwife struggles to find out if the baby is alive, tries to establish the state of your condition, and heroic efforts are made to locate a doctor who might perform life-saving surgery. And that's the operating room. No light. Well, why? Because there's a power shortage, or the backup generator is not working, and it looks like this. What is otherwise a routine medical procedure in our world and source of so much happiness, birth of a child, is now a near life and death proposition for so many in Africa. Energy poverty impairs the ability to conduct emergency care. Midwives trying to start intravenous lines by candlelight, midwives delivering babies by kerosene lantern, surgeries conducted under conditions that translates into maternal and child mortality in the order of 50 to 70%. Lack of electricity renders the entire medical infrastructure built at some expense ineffective. This is almost the equivalent of, for want of a nail, the kingdom is lost. And what would it take to turn this operating room into this? What's notable here is the fact that the operating room becomes completely functional with only 15 watts of power, 4 2.5 watt LED bulbs for ambient light, and a 5 watt surgical LED light. Well, how so? How can you achieve that? This is the solution. Dr. Laura Stackel writes desperately to her engineer husband in California. Says, what I need is light. And they concoct this solution, solar Suitcase. It's now a not-for-profit organization called We Care Solar. What we have is a flexible, rugged platform designed to provide reliable DC electricity for any kind of environment where access to power is critical but unavailable. This innovation, born out of urgent necessity, I think is a powerful example of what can be done. It comes with everything you need to provide instantaneous power right out of the box and provides medical light all night long. The case can be mounted permanently or used for mobile applications. So if you think that's the answer, let me point out one or two small facts. The cost is high. That's about $2,500 US. About 5 to 6 times the annual income of a person in this part of the world. So we have to ask ourselves and challenge ourselves in the following way. Can the cost be reduced by a factor of 10? Can we improve the solar efficiency by a large margin or improve battery densities by another 50%? What can innovation deliver that is a step change that would make this elegant solution scalable and widely available worldwide? To address the energy access for communities distant from the grid, the development of off-grid energy solutions holds enormous promise. Micropower, distributed generation, cost-effective storage, and a wide range of smart energy technologies provide telltale signs of an opportunity for some regions to literally leapfrog the technologies of the central grid. An analogy here is the wireless mobile phone that made the cost of building telephone lines, landlines, in emerging economies almost redundant. So, designing for developing world markets is a unique challenge. Solutions must perform well across a number of metrics in order to be sustainable and scalable over the long term. And so here are the design criteria, I call them my 10 commandments if you wish, that any proposed solution, if it can satisfy these criteria, would be a credible answer for a difficult challenge. Of course, they have to be low cost, robust, durable, compact, easy to install, easy to transport, modular, scalable, requiring only low level of technical expertise, low maintenance, easy to operate, and requirements for limited additional infrastructure. And there is promise. We begin to see components of distributed energies technologies. Solar is an example. we're seeing an enormous drop in cost over the last, certainly over the last 10 years, at an amazing pace. And we see similar transformations and improvements in performance of battery technologies, cost declining faster than expected. And we see the promise of affordable information communication technologies. Integration of ICT brings huge opportunity. I pointed that out earlier. And we're talking here of remote monitoring of systems, mobile payment systems, pay-as-you-go energy systems, new business models, energy sharing, smart energy networks, consumer data collection in emerging markets, and so on. Going back to the proposition around tiered access to electricity and energy. So let's think of tier 1 at the smallest scale. Inexpensive solar lanterns, mobile phone chargers can replace the use of kerosene and expensive trips to mobile phone charging stations. Moving up to the tier 2 to 3 levels, these are just some examples here that I'm trying to make it concrete for you. Solar home systems can power TVs, fans, radios, multiple indoor and outdoor lights, even a small refrigerator. We're working with a group called Mobisol, a company, small, medium enterprise out of Berlin, Germany. They're a partner in some of the work we're doing. And they've sold tens of thousands of solar home systems in Rwanda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And in their business model, they soon realized that it's not only just lack of electricity infrastructure that's a problem in this part of the world, but the transport, the roads are a challenge. So they are experimenting with drone-based delivery of spare parts in regions where roads are often impassable during wet season. Thinking of innovation, something that I would not have thought of, but this is in play. They're not claiming economic feasibility yet, but they're testing it. Tier 4 and 5 levels then. Renewable microgrids can power entire villages without the need to connect to transmission lines from the grid. And here a combination of solutions, whether it's solar, wind, bioenergy, microhydro, and a mix of resources that are local can begin to play a role. Just enough power for local economic activity and provision of key public services. Another positive, heartwarming example, if you wish, over 3 million solar home systems sold in Bangladesh in the last 10 years, largely as a result of an innovative government-led financing program. Flexible solutions from this partner organization called SolShare. They connect standalone home systems, there could be just 2, to create a nanogrid with sharing electricity between homes. You only need a controller box in your home plus a cable linking to your neighbor's home. Those who don't have enough money or are too shaded to buy a solar panel can still join the network and buy power from their neighbors. Much more efficient and affordable use of energy than standalone systems. And so this is where we begin to blur the lines between standalone systems, tier 1 levels of energy services, to higher levels for economic productivity and income generating opportunities. Systems get a little more complicated, but that's the ladder up. Another example, I'm coming close to my talk, so please have some patience with me. We're working with this group, Bund. They've initiated one of a number of efforts to develop solar-powered projectors for classrooms. And other kinds of initiatives of this kind are underway in Africa as well. The projector includes a year's worth of lessons stored internally. So in rural parts of the world, teachers often do not show up 50% of the time, I'm told, and have very few resources to help them with lessons. There is a large variation in the quality of education across rural villages. These projectors can help remedy this partly at least, and by helping to motivate the teachers, reduce the gaps in knowledge across underprivileged remote communities. So, giving teachers and trainers the means to be effective teachers is one key goal of diffusion of new technologies. It doesn't end here. It is not that we just want electrons. It is energy services. So rather than bigger solar panels, we can also increase access to energy services by using every watt more efficiently. The Global Lighting and Energy Access Partnership has an awards program to catalyze the market in super efficient DC appliances. They've done light bulbs, fans, TVs. Now they've just launched a program on refrigerator competition. And you need such incentive programs to spur innovation in this crucial area. This is what we're doing. It's a complex problem, as I've tried to outline, and it will require contributions from many disciplines and domains of knowledge. For example, to understand the concept of a tiered level of need, we can look at an income level, let's say in the order of $3 to $5 per day for an individual, or a monthly budget of around $7.50 per month for energy services. Now, if electricity delivered by solar-powered mini-grid costs, say 25 cents a kilowatt hour, and a portfolio of appliances requires 80 kilowatt hours, then based on the affordability gap, this is clear. Either the cost of electricity has to come down by 60%, or the base portfolio of appliances need to improve by 60%. The simple point is this: we need to develop a comprehensive understanding of the barriers to advancement and then catalyze a massive influx of talent, finance, leadership, innovation to develop and deploy the next generation of solutions so that we can meet the SDG 7. The schematic here is to illustrate a massive effort we are undertaking at Waterloo to shape up to 300 signature projects for the development of the next generation devices and systems to be enabled by ICT, and to ensure that there is a process for diffusion pathways for mass scale adoption of the solutions, so that last part of this curve, which shows the declining cost curves, will get us to affordable energy. I've pointed out science and technological innovation needed across a number of domains. We have identified 4 domain areas, as shown here, in the area of generation devices and advanced materials, microgrids for dispersed power, ICT for energy convergence, environmental and human dimensions of energy transitions. And I'd like to emphasize the environmental and human dimensions of energy transitions. To understand the social and cultural context is critically important, because it allows a meaningful alignment of the emerging technology into the lives of people as they make use of it. We want to lower impacts on the environment, of course, and not to repeat mistakes of the past. For long-term sustainability, we need innovative business models to reduce reliance on philanthropy. Fundamental breakthroughs in physics, chemistry, and material science will form the backbone of the transformative technologies. But to go from scientific insights to devices and integrated systems is a long journey with many pitfalls and setbacks along the way. But we remain positive and enthusiastic about the role of information science and communication technologies and how it will shape our energy futures. If you bear with me, I'll show you a short video. What we do here at Waterloo really is fundamental science and research, but with a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. What can science and technological innovation do to change the equation in a way that makes energy affordable to the people who have very little?
We've got almost 300 remote and northern communities across northern Canada, and about 170 of those are First Nations communities. The electricity can end up costing close to $1 a kilowatt hour for these remote communities. So it is very expensive, and in some cases not even available.
How we can help is with two types of technologies. The first is renewable. And by renewable, we might mean solar or wind. The second technology is batteries, storage, energy storage.
It's really critical to be able to store renewable energy, ideally from solar power or perhaps from wind power, in affordable systems to allow for, in affordable batteries, to allow for load leveling and also for storage at night or even off-season storage.
There is actually a wonderful graphic that I often show, which is the image of the world at night. And you can see those areas of darkness and those areas of light. And it's very indicative of really those who have access and those who don't, and in fact how this drives a whole range of energy policy issues.
Being Waterloo, we're implementers, right? We like to say, let's make things work better.
So the technology is now coming into place, which allows us to put a panel on the roof, put storage, put efficient lighting, and you have the ability to transform lives.
We believe that we have come a long way. So we are providing leadership within Ontario, and we are basically leading some of the major efforts, and we're coming up with new ideas that were not there before.
Yes, scientific and technological innovations, but a whole host of other things have to come into play, particularly entrepreneurs and people who will take these solutions and scale them up and bring them into the context of the lives of the people as they live it. And therefore I am at the end, in the last slide, some but not all the partners, some 30 leading institutions around the world, both academic, small and medium enterprises and non-governmental organizations in 12 countries. Because we really believe that we can collectively solve this problem in no more than 2 decades. And I'll leave you with one last observation, and it's a wonderful quote by Voltaire saying, "No problem can withstand the attack of sustained thought." Thank you.